We often think of freedom as just being left alone, right? But what if it's more than that? Today, we're diving into the revolutionary ideas of John Stuart Mill, a thinker who completely flipped the script on the definition of liberty, and, believe it or not, helped build the world we live in today. Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to start with the problem Mill was trying to fix, then jump into his radical solution, see how it plays out with big issues like women's rights, and then we'll wrap up by looking at how his ideas are still shaping our world. Let's do this.
All right, to really get why Mill was such a big deal, we first need to understand the crisis he was looking at. Let's set the scene and talk about the dominant idea of freedom back in the 19th century and the absolute chaos it was causing.
So is freedom simply a case of don't tread on me? Back during the Industrial Revolution, the answer to that was a big, loud yes. But this completely hands-off approach was leading to some brutal stuff. Horrific working conditions, child labor, and crushing poverty for almost everyone. It was clear something had to give. This whole idea has a name. It's called negative liberalism. The thinking goes like this. You are most free when the government gets out of your way. The state's only real job is to protect your stuff and make sure people honor their contracts. It's kind of like a night watchman, there to stop break-ins, but otherwise, you never see him. But here's the thing. In the real world, this freedom was a total catastrophe for the working class. It created a society with massive inequality, where really only the wealthy were free. And people were starting to call it out. Authors like Charles Dickens and John Ruskin were writing these powerful stories exposing the grim reality of it all. And this is where our main guy, John Stuart Mill, steps onto the scene. He saw the deep injustice of this system and just knew that the whole idea of liberalism needed a serious, radical overhaul. See, Mill looked at all this and basically said, hey, what good is being left alone if you're just being left alone to starve? He imagined a new kind of freedom, one that actually required the government to step in and play an active part in creating a fairer society for everyone. And this, right here, is the absolute heart of Mill's big idea. The state has a responsibility to actually empower people. He believed the government should be actively creating opportunities for everyone to thrive, not just passively watching from the sidelines. So Mill's thinking didn't just cause a few ripples, it sparked a full-blown revolution in political thought. He completely changed the job description of government, from a passive guard to an active helper. This new philosophy gets a new name, positive liberalism. It's the idea that real freedom is way more than just not having rules. It's about having the actual ability to shape your own life. You know the saying, freedom isn't just the absence of chains, it's being able to walk somewhere. That's the core of it. Okay, this little comparison chart just lays it all out perfectly. You see on the left, with negative liberalism, freedom means freedom from the state. But look at the right. With positive liberalism, freedom is achieved through the state. We go from seeing ourselves as isolated atoms to part of a community, and the government's job shifts from doing almost nothing to having a real positive role to play. So in this new way of thinking, the state isn't the enemy of freedom anymore. It's actually a tool for good. Its job, as Mill saw it, is to clear the path for people by tackling the things that hold them back. Things like poverty, poor education, and bad healthcare. And this wasn't just some high-minded theory for Mill. He put his money where his mouth was, applying these principles to one of the biggest social justice fights of his day, the struggle for women's equality. Now, this is where Mill was way ahead of his time. His argument was absolutely groundbreaking. He said that the so-called natural differences people saw between men and women had nothing to do with nature at all. It was all just the result of centuries of oppression and social pressure. He just completely dismantled all the tired, flimsy arguments for gender inequality. He saw that society had basically manufactured an artificial version of womanhood using a system of rewards and punishments, which he brilliantly called a state of bribery and intimidation, just to keep women in their supposed place. Okay, so you might be thinking, this is all interesting history, but why does a philosopher from the 1800s matter to me today? Well, turns out, his ideas are literally all around us. Let's look at his lasting impact. Think about the modern welfare state, that whole idea that the government should provide a safety net for people, things like public schools, social security, unemployment benefits. That's a direct line from Mill's revolutionary thinking. He's pretty much the architect of the idea that the state should help protect us, from the cradle to the grave.
So when you boil it all down, what's the big takeaway? Mill's greatest gift to us was that he totally redefined freedom. He showed us that real liberty is this constant, tricky balancing act between our individual rights and the good of everyone else. A debate that is still at the absolute center of our politics today on everything from healthcare to climate change.
And that really leaves us with a huge question, one that Mill's work forces us to think about even right now. Where do we draw that line between personal freedom and what we owe each other as a society? As we face these massive new challenges like AI and global pandemics, how we answer that question, well, it's going to define our future. What do you think?